I was just watching the parade for the women's national soccer team. Great job by New York and de Blasio and everybody. Even though I don't live there anymore, and it's been, 20-something years, a long time. The thing about it is they know how to throw a parade. Mm-hmm. And as a kid, I always watched them going back to, like the moon landing to the 69 Mets all the way through my childhood, right? They did a great job with this. But there were a couple highlights that I'd like to talk about. First one was Carli Lloyd got up there, and she's really good. Like when I was I went to a presser at the in Philly for the Philly Sports Writers Convention. She was there, gave a great speech. She's really a high quality, fun person. And so she talked about being a Jersey girl, and she's a Jersey girl all the way through. And then she says, yeah, and I really love New York, but I'm still an Eagles fan. And you should have heard the cheers.
She sang Fly Eagles Fly.
She did. And that was funny because that drew a lot of jeers for a moment, like the goodwill was gone.
That's brave.
Like 10
That's
seconds,
really brave.
Yeah, for 10 seconds the goodwill was gone, but then they got back to it. That was funny. Megan Rapinoe said the F word.
Shocking.
At the very end, so it's like, listen, you should always have these things on delay. These are athletes. Mm-hmm. Somebody is going to drop the F-bomb. Somebody will do it. It is a guarantee. Pre-Chase Utley, post-Chase Utley, it is always going to happen. And that is my point. If you run a network, run a delay.
Did Chase Utley come in and spike somebody?
But, here's what I think, Ant, honestly. Right now, I don't think they want to pay for having a delay and do the extra work. What they do afterwards is just say, oh, we're sorry that happened.
I think they because it gets people talking at this point now. They said, oh, look what they said. And literally, we're talking, 10 years ago? It's like, oh! Now everybody's like, no, we want that because that's going to generate traffic.
Right.
Well, yeah. Well, honestly, it's funny because Friday we'll talk about Live Aid because it's close to the anniversary. But I was watching a documentary on Live Aid after watching the movie Bohemian Rhapsody. And when Bob Geldof swore on BBC, that got people donating money. It was like everything was lagging. And then all of a sudden, I don't know if it was the F-bomb or something else, but it was something, he clearly went off script. And then all of a sudden, the phone started getting, the traffic started coming in. So, it could be for shock value. It could be for effect.
So I have a jeer time. We're going to give a big jeer to Mookie Betts. I know, Mike, you won't have a problem doing that because he plays for the Red Sox. Mm-hmm. But apparently, and I heard this on the radio today, so I'm hoping it's true, but apparently he did not want to do a commercial at the All-Star game, basically pushing like the have fun angle for kids. He refused to do it. And, nowadays, and of course that radio station went on to say even with the Phillies, when they went to camp this year, nobody wanted to come over and interview. Like nobody. They did eventually get Harper, I think, because Harper is an easy interview. But the point is about baseball is, like with the All-Star game, they did a better job of marketing, although nobody should have Joe Buck in their ear. It's like putting Pierre Maguire in somebody's ear. That's torturous. I could tell Pete Alonso didn't even want to really talk to Joe Buck.
Yeah, but all the baseball players were puzzled when Joe Buck was asking them whether he played at Shattuck St. Mary's.
Yeah, no, but the funny thing was, like, and this is, again, like, I'm sure Joe Buck could have prepared questions, but he just didn't seem like he wanted to. And so, like, with Pete Alonso, he was like, oh, you must have been – I heard you only had one cup of coffee this morning. It must have been because you couldn't lift the coffee cup because you were so tired from home run derby. It's like, that's the last thing an athlete's going to joke about is how tired he might have been for the night before. Like, if you've ever covered sports, like, Ant, if we cover sports, what athlete ever admits to being tired when they're in an event?
Never. It's a sign of weakness.
Right. But he went there on national TV, and it turned him off completely. And it just makes me wonder what Fox was thinking. Like, maybe put a player in the player's ear. Don't put Joe Buck in their ear. That was a mistake.
just to go along with Mookie Betts, and then we'll start talking about hockey. I saw an article. I cannot remember where it was. It might have been The Athletic, but it was based on Marcus Stroman, who is obviously a pitcher for the Blue Jays, who was nominated for the All-Star game but couldn't pitch because of a minor arm problem, who's probably going to be traded before the July 31st deadline. And it was interviewing a number of players who were basically saying, in spite of the outward, he's sort of a difficult guy. He's sort of a red ass, one of those type of players. Yeah. But he's a good pitcher, and teams like Milwaukee or Minnesota or the Yankees, where he's from the New York area.
He's from Long Island, actually. Yeah.
He's from Long Island. Yeah, that they would, they would be interested in him in spite of that sort of attitude. And they interviewed CC Sabathia and DJ LeMahieu, and they're all like, "Oh yeah, I mean, I'd love it. I mean, we need a pitcher, and he's a competitive guy." And Mookie Betts, his comment was like about Stroman going to the Yankees was like, "Whatever, it doesn't really affect us." And I'm like, "That's okay." First of all, if you wanted him on your team, that kind of reaction would be off-putting. If you're reacting that way about him going to your main competition, which the Yankees are, I mean, I know you won a World Series last year, and you're probably still basking in the glow of that, but that doesn't exactly show that you have a competitive edge, that you wouldn't mind if an all-star pitcher goes to your main competition. I think actually it looks pretty stupid.
Yeah. The other comment. Go ahead. Sorry, yeah.
For me, it's just the guy who's ultra. To me, it reads as a guy who's wants to make sure obviously put on a strong front. Trust me, Marcus Stroman would be going to the Red Sox. I don't think Mookie Betts is going to be complaining one bit. He'll be thrilled to have him on his team.
Right.
I feel like that it's more of a case of, again, going back to that whole idea of showing a sign of weakness, that if he goes to your rival, you don't want your rival to think that you are worried about them.
Yeah.
Even though realistically, deep down, they're like, well, it's another good arm. It makes things a little bit more difficult for us, but you're never going to get – it's the same principle here with what Russ just stated with with Alonso, is that you're not going to show weakness. These guys are high-level athletes. They're not going to publicly show you weakness. Or now, privately, you get them along the side.
Yeah, I will say sometimes –
be concerned, but it's off the record. He'll say it off the record, not on the record.
Yeah. The last thing, too, is I saw that Tony Clark complained that Mookie Betts is not a household name and should be marketed better. We all know that Major League Baseball should market better, but the PA could market him better. How about that, Tony Clark? You've got to. That's part of your job, is to market these guys as being the president of the MLBPA. Like, it just seemed like, why would he complain about this for baseball when he can do something about it?
I think Tony Clark was a better baseball player than he was a leader of the MLBPA, and he wasn't a very good baseball player. He was
decent. He had some power.
Big switch hitting first baseman who, I just never thought he was that great. Anyway,
neither was Cliff Johnson, but we move on.
Yes. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Wednesday, July 10th, 2019.
I'm Anthony Majoni from Sunrise Philly Magazine.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm friendly Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Okay, we had a trade yesterday, and we're going to talk a lot about that, because not just about the trade, but also about the ramifications and the two teams that were involved, because there are interesting stories, and there's not a lot to talk about. So we're going to stretch, and we're going to do We're going to do one of our games, not the F Mary Kill game, Anthony. I came up with another one, Okay, a trade comes down yesterday afternoon. Two young prospects who basically looking for a change. I think both teams were looking for a change of scenery for both of them. The Sabres trade former 8th overall pick Alex Nylander to the Chicago Blackhawks for defenseman Henri Jokiharju. Jokiharju played for Team Finland last year, who won gold at the World Junior. I think he just turned 20 years old. Now, I say change of scenery because, and I know this because of being in Buffalo, Nylander was not a great success after being picked. There was talk about him coming up in his first year. He only played 4 games. Next year, he only played 3 games at the end of the season. Played a lot better in the AHL this past season, but still there was question of whether he was ever going to break through, and he was a Tim Murray draft pick. So I think that there was a little bit of, this is not my guy from Jason Haru, so we can move him on. Yoki Haru apparently was a favorite of Joel Quenneville. He was played a lot. He was played with Duncan Keith when he was before the World Junior. Then he went to the World Junior. Quenneville was fired. Colleton takes over as head coach. He doesn't play, and then he gets sent to Rockford, and then essentially they've moved on from him because they've had they have other players like Bo Quist and Eric Gustafson who are maybe ahead of him on the depth chart. So Russ, what do you think just in terms of the value for value on this deal?
I think Buffalo got a slight edge today, and it could even out if we ever see the real Alex Nylander. Like, I've seen the real Alex Nylander for 3/4 of games in big tournaments, in big moments. And then I've seen an Alex Nylander where the motor is just not great. He's got all the tools. Like, there's nothing – you look at this guy, and if you put him in a scouting combine or just in a scrimmage game, you'd be like, this guy's an NHLer. But then when you play over the course of a game, the rigors of a game, he's not there every shift to shift. Now, maybe this will jar him a bit. I don't know, because yesterday he was already wearing his dad's Blackhawks jersey and doing that stupid flip the cap thing, whatever that's called.
Right, the bottle cap challenge.
And I got to say, I get he's a teenager, but that wasn't the greatest thing to do that day. Like, it was just he probably didn't realize he'd be judged on it. I'm just saying it. It's just one of those things.
Go ahead, Anthony.
That when people want to talk about Alex Nylander, it's going to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, for now, I would agree with you in terms of the Yoki Haru end of things. I actually like his fit in Buffalo, even though they're still trying to figure out with so many defensemen for 6 slots. But as a right D, I think he's going to be he's a good player to grow with for them. The Nylander thing, boy, in so many ways, it reminds me a lot of last year's trade for Dylan Strome. It's something that, honestly, Bowman has had stock and trade in taking guys on board that, especially young players that didn't quite work out elsewhere. Right. And then they turn into something with him. And the most recent one being obviously Dylan Strome. I do have my concerns. Always sometimes when I see I always sometimes have the initial knee-jerk reaction whenever I see the name Nylander and Motor mentioned at the same time. But but that being said, this could be, with his father having prior history playing in Chicago, I think there's a decent chance that over the long haul that this could actually turn out to be a much more even trade. I think both teams got things that they needed, which is what we always say about a lot of trades. But I Nylander has, as Russ stated, I think he's got the tools to do it. It's just the motor's got to be more constant. If they can get that out of him, then I think it has a chance to be a really good trade for Chicago.
And I'll say this: the other part about Yoki Haru is he's got a bomb of a shot and he's really good on the power play. He has to work on his defense a lot, and that's part of why
I think they were getting a younger Yarmulson. I really do. I think that from that draft year, and he's not Yarmulson.
No,
he's not that kind of a lock.
No, and he's way more offensive than a Yarmulson ever was too.
So I can see him again in terms of fitting in on its third pair in Buffalo, potentially hot top end second pair. Yeah, I definitely get to see the fit. Again, we have to see what remains for Buffalo in terms of what they're going to do with any of those extra defense.
Well, let's just say this. I mean, first of all, like I said previously, he was a Tim Murray draft pick, and I remember, Alex Nylander was looked upon as a good prospect, but then at the World Junior in 2016, when he stepped in for William when William got hurt in the first game, and he moved to center. And everybody said, and he had a great tournament. Everybody said, wow, this is unbelievable. This guy is going to be really good. And they picked him 8th overall. And I know and I've been told this by a couple different Sabre reporters. That sort of confirms the story. He was in Mississauga in the OHL his draft year. The following year, as an 18-year-old, he went to the Amerks. He signed his pro contract and he went to play in the AHL. Apparently, Michael, who was his hands on with both of his sons. Mm-hmm. And you know that because he's involved with Louis Gross as part of the agency. So he was involved in the William negotiations. And I know for a fact, based on what I was told from other people, that he was always pressing Buffalo management. When are you going to call up Alex? He's ready to be in the NHL. Buffalo management, not Tim Murray, but other people in management said, we'll call him up at the end of the year. And then when he contacted Murray at the end of the year, Murray basically told him he's not ready. And they told you something. That wasn't me. And I ended up playing 4 games. But from that point on, it seemed like both sides were not on the same page. He only played 3 games the following year. He had a better year in the American Hockey League last year. But once Botterill came in there, I think the path towards him leaving the organization or being moved as an asset was the way it was going to go. And he may be like Dylan Strome, where he goes out and plays great in Chicago. But the comment that he made to the media, and I'll read this here. This is a quote from Mark Lazarus. Thought maybe I would be in the NHL sooner than I have been, but I'm looking forward to be part of the Blackhawks organization. They're really good with development players. They know what they're doing. Stuff that happened in Buffalo and Rochester is in the past, which basically saying they didn't know what they were doing. Well, maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But you know what? That's not the kind of stuff you say walking out the door.
Right, because other players have developed in Buffalo. So you have to look at yourself, and that's, where he has to mature a little bit. But again, in a year or two, that could still look really decent for them too. What I think where this hurt Buffalo is when they drafted Nylander, they were hoping they get a center. Like we talked about, Mike, they found out early on he was not going to be that.
Right.
And they're now, like, aside from Middlestat, they're kind of hurting at the center position now in their organization.
Yeah, a guy like Rasmus Asplund might be a 4th-line center this year.
Right.
He might make it out of training camp, but yeah,
or they play Mojo at center, but I don't know if I'd recommend that.
I wouldn't do that.
Well, they're see, and that's moving on.
Billy, we do.
But moving on to the next part of the conversation, and we'll go. That's part of the point here. There's been a lot of talk in Buffalo, Anthony, about them moving Sam Reinhart to the middle, them asking questions of Marcus Johansson when he signed his contract about, reporters were asking, when did you play center? Can you play center? And he says he's open to it, but he's played mostly left wing the last 2 or 3 years. So it's not his strong suit. Middlestat's 20 years old. I mean, a lot of the talk now is, okay, now you've got, I think, 7 right-handed defensemen. Now you have a lot of depth there. Rasmus Ristolainen. We're looking for a second-line center. That's
the next obvious step here when you have a surplus of defensemen in this case, and Buffalo has a need at second-line center. So, yeah, the pieces would certainly seem to fit in that circumstance. The question is, do you have anybody out there that's offering that?
Well,
so that's the thing.
Russ, I mean, that's what we were talking about before. It's like, okay, it's easier. Oh, we got weird feedback. Hold on. Okay, now
sounds like aliens.
Yeah, no, it was weird. But that's what we were talking about earlier this morning. It's like, okay, yeah, it's easy to say now we can trade Ristolainen for a number 2 center. Who's got an extra number 2 center that's sitting?
That's the issue there. And it's going to have to shake out. Maybe a case where it shakes out closer to September.
Yeah, I think if they had made this trade pre-draft, before teams started spending money, they would have had an easier time. But here's an example. Like, if you want to make this trade and you either have extra cap space, then you could go to a team like Arizona and you could probably get Derek Stepan, who is a second-line center.
Right.
But then it's going to cost you, right? Because he's got a deal of 6.5. It's more than Ristolainen. Those are probably the only types of deals you could make to get somebody that could actually play second-line center, whereas otherwise I think they're going to get a guy where you say, he might be able to play second-line center. Right. That's what I think they're going to end up getting for him.
Now, I mean, John Vogel, the Athletic, put up he just clearly said, I'm just spitballing here. I'm not reporting any rumor. Right. He was just saying, okay, here's some names with teams that would definitely be interested in Ristolainen, but what do you think the odds are of these? And he floated Winnipeg, and the names he floated were Laine, Kyle Connor, Nick Ehlers, and then obviously with Tampa Bay, it was Anthony Cirelli. The problem with this is like, okay, they're not moving Laine. Even if it's a bridge deal, they're not moving him. Connor scored 30 goals. They're not moving him for a defenseman, even though, we talked about it yesterday about Niku and Pullman and Logan Stanley. I think they're going to do that ahead of, making a trade like that. Now, if it's Brian Little, then I think they would do it. If it's Tampa and it's
they're not doing Ehlers either.
Right, they're not doing Ehlers either. If it's Tyler Johnson in Tampa Bay, okay. But why would they move Cirelli when I think he's got 2 years left on his ELC?
They wouldn't. They wouldn't, and he scored the most shorthanded goals on the team, I believe. So you wouldn't do that. And again, why would they do that to add 5 point whatever million? Like, they're not going to do that.
Well, that's why Little or Johnson makes sense, because they're making comparable salaries.
Yeah, I'm not even sure they would do Johnson, but they might. Little, they definitely would do.
Little, I could see. I agree with Russ on that. Tyler, I don't see as likely with Tyler, but Little, that would be a potential match there.
Yeah, and I mean, possibly a team like Vegas, if they thought Cody Glass was ready to move in and they could trade. I mean, they're not going to trade Paul Stastny, but
your center situation, these first and second lines already set. You got Stastny and you've got Wild Bill, all now locked under contract. So where do you go from there?
Yeah,
and they don't. I mean, most of the rest of it, the remaining centers are.
Well, and they're not going to trade. They're not going to trade. I mean, Cody Eakin's not an answer, and you're not gonna trade Glass because he's on his ELC because he's cheap, and they're already up against the cap. And the only other team, like, I was going around the league to see, like, okay, who could use a defenseman who has an extra center, and Artem Anisimov in Chicago, but I think you'd have to get a lot more than Anisimov in a deal for Ristolainen.
Plus, the acquisition Chicago's already made already on defense. Right. I mean, that's an area of emphasis all summer. They would probably be subtracting from their blue line.
Correct.
I don't know where Buffalo's at with that. So,
well, and switching. Wow, we're getting real bad feedback here occasionally. Switching to Chicago here, Russ. It's like we were talking about Seabrook and Keith.
Mm-hmm.
Keith has 4 more years at 5.5, and if they bought him out, they would get the cap recapture because
right.
it was one of those front loaded deals, and we know what that did to Vancouver with the Luongo. Seabrook has 5 more years at $6.875 million, and I believe a lot of that signing bonus. So there wouldn't be a great savings on a buyout, and the buyout would last 10 years, or even if they wait until after next year, it would be 8 years. So they're stuck with those guys unless all of a sudden they contract a rash like Marian Hossa.
Yeah, if one of them goes on vacation and gets malaria, then they might be able to get out of the deal.
We do the Hossa rash reference at least once a week.
Yes.
But I will say this too, Mike. Another reason that Nylander was attracted to him, and we talked about this, is because he hasn't burnt a year of his ELC. Right. And to a team like Chicago that is massively important right now to save as much as they can to offset some of these other massive failure type contracts that they have to stay competitive. So this is, it's a balancing act for them. This is not easy, but to get rid of those 2 guys, it doesn't seem like you can do it. But I think the way they'll do it is, and again, we all say this, so I'm going to preface this. Just because everybody knows it's true doesn't mean somebody won't do it. So when the expansion draft comes around, don't tell me that Chicago might not offer a prospect or something for Seattle to get one of those guys, Keith or Seabrook, to get them off the books, because they just might do it.
Yeah, I mean, well, they would have to be protected. I think both of them have no moves. So they would have to be protected in the expansion draft, which probably would mean they would have to be traded to Seattle. But again, this is a situation where they might be willing to give up a first-round pick
or a really good prospect. They might have to give up a prospect.
Or really, and this was the interesting thing, switching to Chicago.
Minnesota gave up Alex Tuck. How does that look today?
Right. and continue with Chicago here. They've traded every first-round pick from 2011 to 2017. Jokiharju was their pick in 2017. I have the list here. Here you go. Mark McNeil, Philip Deneau, who is now in Montreal. McNeil, I think his contract expired and he's afraid.
Yeah, he just never really made it.
Teo Teravainen, Ryan Hartman, Nick Schmaltz, and Jokiharju. So that's 6 first-round picks in a row that are now in 2019 are no longer with that organization.
And that's because they're a cap problem team. That's what happens.
Yeah, and that's usually where most of those deals ended up being. For example, we all know that obviously with Teravainen.
Yep.
But again, they also parlayed that into, hey, we got Brandon Saad back. Whoopee!
Right.
For the Hawks to do, bring back players from their cup teams earlier in the decade. Now they got Shaw back. This is a pattern that the Hawks have had in recent years. So,
yeah, I mean, one thing, like I said, with the Sabres, and just to put a capper on this, now they have 7 right-hand shot defensemen: Ristolainen, Montour, Colin Miller, Bogosian, who's probably going to be out until November with the reconstructive shoulder surgery, Casey Nelson, Will Borgen, and Jokiharju. So that's, I mean,
yeah, they got a big traffic jam there.
If they ever go away with a left-handed shot in the NHL, they'll be set.
And the thing is, though, it sets them up for another trade. It may not be Ristolainen. I was spitballing with Russ here about Jesse Puljujarvi, because I think the right side in Buffalo is a little weak. And the funny thing is, Alex Nylander is a right winger, and they traded him even though the right side is weak for them. Puljujarvi might be somebody, because with Ralph Kruger, I mean, he's good with reclamation projects, and we know that Edmonton's looking for defensive depth. I think there's a possibility that the Sabres could be a potential destination for a Puljujarvi.
I think it's a possibility.
Can't be the only piece going back, though, I would say.
No.
Maybe a Jake McCabe, something like that. I mean, it would have to be somebody young enough and somebody who has some potential that would convince Edmonton to do that. And I mean, Edmonton's up against the wall here with him, because if they don't trade him, he's going to the SM Liga or the KHL.
Edmonton wants to do the right thing by the player, which they might, because I think that Ken Holland does that a lot of times.
Sure.
He might send him to a team that doesn't have playoff expectations, so it doesn't put too much pressure on the guy, and he can work his way in the lineup without being the focus of attention like he has been the last few years. So I hope that is what happens for him. I also wanted to tell you, Mike, that I looked over Chicago, and even though they've traded all those first-round picks, they still have 2A, 2B, and a bunch of C prospects. They draft really well. So
yeah,
they are a team that actually can overcome that.
Yeah, no, I mean, Boquist is probably going to be in the league in the next 2 years.
I mean, Mitchell's getting close.
Yeah, and they drafted Kirby Dach 3rd overall. So, I mean,
can't get Alex DeBrincat in the 2nd round, as we are
always. Gee, I remember somebody talking about that one.
Yeah.
Okay, so all right, let's talk about some news. Elliot Friedman reported just about a half hour ago that the Vancouver
from the Cottage.
I'm not sure where he is.
Okay.
But the Vancouver Canucks and Michael.
Mike's always growing the beard.
Yeah. Yeah, but I can't match
what Elliot's beard. Elliot's beard was epic. He needs to keep
Holy
that.
shit! It was 3 months. Oh, sorry. It was 3 months, and he looked like Grizzly Adams. I complimented him when I saw him in Toronto at training camp. I'm like, what the hell? It's like
just gotta trim it. That's all. All you have to do is
I gotta tell you something. All that means is he probably didn't see his mother a lot, because if he saw his mother, his mother does not like a beard like that. I can tell you right off the bat, man.
But the Canucks and Michael Ferland are closing in on a contract. Now, there's no report of the length of the deal or the amount of the deal, but I mean, Ferland makes a bit of sense for the Canucks. I think the Canucks need some help on the wing. They have the centers, and I mean Miller could play center, Horvat, and then Elias Pettersson. So I think they need some quality depth on the wings, and I think Ferland would play a pretty big role with them. The question is, Russ, is like he sort of plays the same role that Virtanen plays. So does this maybe mean that Virtanen might be on the way out?
No, I don't know if Ferland's going there. I mean, if they could get him on a shorter deal, like a 3-year deal, then fine.
Right.
You could have more than one Jake Virtanen type player on your team. It's not going to hurt you.
It's a 4x4 deal, which was getting out there.
No team wants to pay him 4 or 5. They don't believe in him enough.
Yeah,
right. That's really where we're at. And so
I think it's also a case where people automatically assume it's Vancouver. Of course, they're going to overpay because that's what Vancouver does. You know,
right?
I think there's a bit of bias in some of that commentary. But again, if it is that number, Russ, let's say it is 4x4.
Yeah.
Then I kind of watch that from where I'm sitting here in Philadelphia with the Flyers negotiating with Travis Konechny. Now, one's an RFA, one's a UFA.
Yeah.
4x4 for a guy who's 22 and has the same level of offensive production as Ferland's had.
Yeah, he might get 4.25 or something on
exactly. That gives you even more of a base, especially for Konechny's agent, to say you can't go under that. If Ferland's making that and he's injury prone, I should be making more.
Right. I get and I have nothing to base this on other than a feeling. I have a weird feeling it could be a 1-year deal, 1 or 2-year deal. It's sort of like
you would think, right?
It could be what he sells for. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he goes someplace where he knows he's going to play. Maybe he's going to play with Pettersson. Maybe he's going to play with. If he plays with Pettersson, he's there in a way to protect him because he's a big body guy and he'll make him pay if somebody tries to take liberties with him. And if he plays with him, he's probably going to get 25 to 30 goals. I mean, he's got enough talent, and Pettersson's that good of a playmaker that could happen. So he could set himself up for another big year next year, an opportunity to get a big contract next year. And he's 27 years old, something like that, Russ?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay. Some interesting contract signings. Dan Heinen signs a 2-year deal for $2.8 million per with the Bruins, avoiding arbitration. Had a decent year with the Bruins. At times played with Marchand and Bergeron. And I talked to Ty Anderson yesterday, and one of the things he was telling, and we know that line, that Bergeron, Pasternak, Marchand line, is the best line in the league. But like other teams, the Bruins really have to find a way to have Pasternak or somebody on that line play on a different line to have a 2-line offensive attack. And I don't know if Heinen is the answer as a long-term situation, but really they need somebody so they could put maybe Pasternak with Krejci and have a 2-line attack.
It crippled them in the end in the Stanley Cup. It did, because once that line went cold, they couldn't do anything. So I agree with you. I think they have to do something. I don't know if Heinen's that guy. I still look at Heinen more as like a 3rd-line guy.
Right.
And so, I don't know. That might be a bit of a reach now.
Definitely not a Mojo replacement, that's for sure. We know that.
Right. The guy who could be a Mojo replacement, but people put a lot of pressure on him, is Anders Bork. He's got all those abilities, but he hasn't put it all together yet. He has the ability to possibly be a 2nd-line guy, but he's still, 22? 21, 22? I'm not sure he's there yet. That's where Boston's sort of juggling right now.
Well, I mean, they really didn't do anything in free agency. They brought in they lost Achari, they lost Johansson. They brought in Parland home, who's basically a 4th-line versatile forward who can penalty kill. Brett Ritchie from Dallas. So they really didn't replace those guys. I think that they were depending on Bjork and Forsbacka Karlsson and Peter Solaric and these guys Zach Senyshyn maybe to step into roles. But if they don't work out, then they're significantly weaker than they were last year.
I don't think Senyshyn steps into anything, but Solaric could, because he really does have a great shot, and he's a pretty good skater already. He's a guy that could surprise and leapfrog them all, and I think that's why he is getting that chance. And Karlsson is falling flat for me.
Yeah, Solaric didn't look bad in his brief chance last year, so I'm surprised he didn't get.
No, we got to see him here in Philly, and I watched him a few games after, and he did look really good. I think Forsbacka Karlsson is the one who's really disappointing here, because I think they expected him to be that guy by now, and I don't think he is. I think didn't he play on the line with Eichel?
I don't know.
I think he did. I think he was part of that Eichel effect. I do. If he did, I think he did.
Now, a couple other signings here. And Russ, you brought up Jared Careau, former Red Wing goaltender, signed a 1-year, 2-way deal with the Islanders. And I agree with you. I think it's a reflection of a fear of injury.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this told me that even though they gave Varlamov a long-term deal, which for a goalie now, 4 years is a long-term deal these days, that they don't trust his injury history, and they don't want to see Christopher Gibson up there again. And they don't think Linus Soderstrom is ready because he came off an injury last year. So they went and got some insurance. Like, that's what they did, because it's $700,000 at the NHL level and like $250 for the A. Well, this is a smart move. Like, this is because, again, even Grice, Eck aside, when you see him for like a month straight, he starts to have some warts too, even though he had a good year last year.
Well, I'm actually surprised because I thought that might have been, and I wrote yesterday about Garrett Sparks with the Leafs and how I don't believe he'll ever play unless there's injuries. He'll ever play for the Leafs again. The whole point was I thought the Islanders were one place he could go as that third goaltender, but Careau is a 2-way deal, and you said $225,000 or $250,000. Sparks is a 1-way contract. So
no, it's $700,000 at the NHL.
Right. I'm talking about the A.
Okay.
As the third goaltender. In the A, it's $225,000.
Yeah.
If Sparks clears waivers, it's with Toronto or with another team, he's still $750,000. That's the Leafs don't mind paying that because they're made of money and they can bury him down there. But for other teams where money is a consideration, like the Islanders, that's probably too rich of a price.
Yeah.
Okay, Anthony, Malcolm Subban signs a 1-year contract with Vegas. It seemed that like 2 years ago in their first year that Subban was looked upon as he's the future. And now all of a sudden we're getting the hint that they're looking for a future goaltender and they're not confident in Subban being that guy.
I think it's very much a prove-it contract right now for Subban. I do think he's still in their picture, but he's not quite in the area now where they're 100% convinced. At least that's the way it seemed when I saw the contract.
Right.
If they were, this would have been otherwise I think this would have been more of a multi-year deal, 2 to 3 years to still give him a little bit of time. Russ, what do you think?
I think if he proves himself, he could be a future backup. I think they realize he'll never be a number one, but he might be an NHL backup. So let's see if he is that. And if he is that, then maybe he'll prove it this year and get a better deal next year. That's possible. That might be where they're at with him.
All right, let's play our game here with restricted free agents rather than unrestricted. We've got a number of them. We've talked about them ad nauseum. By the way, Eck reported today that he thinks that the Gardner situation is going to be resolved within the next 24 hours. He thinks that he'll be signed in the next 24 hours, so be on the lookout for that. Also talked about a sort of deadline, a silent deadline for Marner for the end of July. I mean, it's based on a source that he's talked to. I get the feeling that Marner's situation is going to last into just before training camp, and that's sort of the basis of this question. I won't include Marner as a part of the list, but whether these players, before
you do the list, though, I did want to mention, as far as for Vegas, I did see.
Is this Gusev?
Isaiah Saville played last year. He's a goalie with the Tri-City Storm.
Okay.
He could be a guy for them, but they still have to bridge the gap because you're looking at a guy like that's 4 years away, maybe more. But I'm just saying, but he could be looked at as their option because he is. No, actually, I didn't see Saville. Hold on. Saville was drafted this year. Maxim Zhukov, I think it was. They have one in the USHL that's pretty good. That's all.
So based on that conversation regarding Marner, and it's a question of whether these players, and we'll say the beginning of training camp, say September 12th or 13th, whatever day it is, whether these players that I list off will be signed to a bridge deal, B, a long-term deal, or C, will remain unsigned. So we'll start with Jacob Trouba, who's got 1 year until unrestricted free agency, Russ. There was talk of a 7-year extension, but it has not come to fruition as of yet. Do you think he'll sign a bridge, another bridge for him, because he signed a 2-year bridge and then a 1-year settlement before arbitration? So a bridge deal, a long-term deal, or basically with him a qualifying offer and then going to free agency?
No, he'll sign a long-term deal. It's just they're hammering out the details. There's a lot of things to consider. With the qualifying offer, they could get a second buyout. So that's going to maybe come up for one of their players, right? So you have to let that happen first.
Right.
If that happens, then you could do that second buyout. So that may be the strategy. If that's not the strategy, then if they send Brendan Smith down again, they do get a savings, right? If they send him to the AHL.
Yeah, $1.025 million. But even
right, so they might do that. They're going to have to do something. And then I think next year either Shattenkirk or Stahl will get bought out. That's right.
Even though they might not go to arbitration with him, just the fact that he's on the list opens up the window.
Yeah.
So that's a good point. Anthony, what do you think? Long-term, short-term, or unsigned or qualifying offer for Trouba?
I agree with Russ. I think he's going to end up getting a long-term contract with the Rangers.
I agree as well.
He's a good he's as good an investment as you can make. He's still got room to grow, as we all know.
Oh yeah.
But I can bank. I think I can bank a little bit on Trouba's ability to continue to grow, and I think New York is a perfect spot for him.
If it was still Winnipeg, I think it'd be the 1 year, and that's why they traded him. But I still can't believe the Rangers got him for that price. Okay, next one, Zach Werenski, coming to the end of his ELC, no arbitration rights, scored 44 points last year. Russ, bridge deal, long-term deal, or unsigned?
Bridge deal.
Okay.
I think it'll be a bridge because I don't know anything about what's going on with him in the organization, but they have plenty of money. And so if they haven't come to an agreement by now, that could be signaling that he might go the Trouba route down the road, which means then a bridge now and figure out where he's going to get traded to later.
Anthony?
I'm endlessly fascinated by the Werenski contract because of how it has potential effect on Ivan Provorov.
Right.
Yeah.
It's tough at the moment because I think, again, I'm inclined to think the longer this goes, the more likely we see a bridge deal with him. That's what I think. I think if it gets done sooner, then I think it'll be a longer term contract. But I'm gonna say that they're gonna have a tough time getting the exact number that they want, and it'll be a bridge deal, and they'll try to figure things out in a year or two if they want to extend him long term.
See, I think the complicating factor here is I don't know if they want to pay him more than Seth Jones. And Seth Jones,
I don't think they do.
Right. And the thing is, though, I don't know whether on a 2-year bridge they're going to be able to keep Werenski underneath. I think it's 5'4" or something like that for Seth Jones. It's something relatively low. Yeah. I don't know if they can keep him under that. I think.
Well, think about this. Think about it this way. It's hard now for teams to hold on to like two guys you consider to be either a 1 or a 2.
Right.
They just re-signed Murray, so that gives them the insurance
to a bridge.
But what is he? 2 more years?
2 more years.
And then they're going to go. I think they'll go 2 more years with Werenski. And then maybe Murray stays there anyhow and Werenski goes. But it's hard to hold on to 3 defensemen like that these days.
Yeah.
And so I think they're just biding their time.
Yeah. I mean, Seth Jones is at 5'4". Ryan Murray's at 4'6" for 2 more years. David Savard is at 4'25" for 2 more years. So if Werenski is looking – that's the thing. If Werenski is looking for long-term, and I think they have the money, so I think they're going to try to get him locked up long-term. It's going to be 7.5 to 8 at least. So it would sort of blow the pay structure away. And then in in 3 years when Seth Jones is a UFA, then he's going to want more than Werenski's making. So, okay, Patrick Laine, 30 goals last year, but it's been pointed out that he scored, I think, 17 of them in like a 3-week span. So it's a very streaky player, but a very accomplished goal scorer, big power winger with a big shot. Coming to the end of his ELC, bridge deal, Anthony, long-term deal or unsigned?
I'd love to say long-term deal, but to me, it seems the way things are going, all the indications are in Winnipeg is that it looks like it's going to be more likely to be a bridge deal. I think there's a gap between the team and the player right now. Mm-hmm. I think it'll be a bridge deal in Winnipeg for Laine.
Russ?
I do want to correct myself. It is Yuri Patera. I just got confused when I was looking at the list, but I went back and looked on Sportsology. He's actually a good prospect for the Knights. So anyhow, moving past that. With Laine, I think he's going to go unsigned, and I think he's going to be a holdout.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, I think Laine has it in his head that he should be like a top 10 paid player in the league because of the way he shoots and the early success he had. I don't think he's going to accept much. I think Winnipeg's in a tough spot here, and I think you have to pay him for his shot. And you have to hope that he's going to score you 40, 50 every year. I don't think there's a way out of this for them.
So, okay, do you think that, and Anthony, you first, do you think that one of these guys is a bridge and the other one, meaning Connor, is the other one, they get one long-term and one bridge, or both? They try to get both on bridges? What do you think? How do you think?
I think they get my gut is I think they get Connor on a long-term.
They will get Connor on a long-term.
They get Laine on a bridge.
Right. Okay.
I don't think Laine will accept the bridge right off the bat. I think
it's it'll be between bridge and no deal. It'll be somewhere in that. It'll be one of those two outcomes.
Yeah, I think he's going to apply pressure based on what he's done, and
I don't know if Winnipeg necessarily. If you got a potential franchise level forward here, which we all think he is, and you lose and you don't get the contract negotiated, you don't Winnipeg's obviously a strong market, a good strong Canadian market, and the fans obviously are love having their team back. You have to be careful when you have a player of that ilk and things kind of go into the ether a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have to see.
Yeah, I'm going to say this too, for the articles that are saying Laine might get offer sheeted. No one's going to offer sheet Patrick Laine because he's a fairly one-dimensional player, and no one is going to want to pay that contract if it comes to fruition on their own offer sheet. Like, they just won't want to do it. And Winnipeg's in a hard spot here because he went from 44 goals to 30. But if you look at Laine, he could score 35, 40 any given year. Yeah. But it has to be a factor all the time in the playoffs.
I actually think he played better in the playoffs than he did in the regular season.
He did. But he's young, right? He's 21. And so you almost have to look at him like Radulov, but better, right? Because he's a little better than Radulov with the shot. But Radulov took a little while. All is going around. And Radulov's a hell of a player now. So you don't want to pay Laine like $12 million now because he's not what he should be yet. But you know what? You're probably going to have to pay him 10. And I think they just need to get it over with already. That's me. That's just my personal feeling.
Right. A couple more, and then we'll take a couple questions in the chat before we end the show. Matthew Tkachuk, end of his entry-level deal, scores 34 goals. You look at Calgary's situation right now. They've got a couple unrestricted free agents at the end of next year with Frolik, and actually 3 defensemen in Brody, Hamonic, and Michael Stone. That takes off about over $11 million in salary. So long-term, and they also have Goudreau and Monahan signed for below $6.5 million. So they have them on good contracts. I'll go first on this one. I think that if they're going to sign Tkachuk, they're going to sign him long-term, something like 6 years. I think they'll spend the money because they see this guy could be, I don't know if saying he's going to be a star might be too much, but I think it's pretty close. I mean, he scored 34 goals and he plays a real tough game like a power forward. So I think that they're going to try to get him locked up long-term. Russ, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's going to be long-term. And I think he's amenable. He's pretty amenable to the kind of terms they're looking for. They love him there. The fans love him. He's their kind of player. like they do need to get him going and build around him and Gaudreau and Monahan. And that's a good place to build around. Like that's well, a lot of teams would kill for that. So yeah, I think long term.
Anthony,
same long-term deal.
Okay,
probably 6 years.
All right, last one, Charlie McAvoy. End of his ELC. Burned a year with the play. I think he played one game in the NHL and then played in the playoffs. I think was a mainstay of the Bruins defense last year, playing with Chara most of the time. The question is, again, Boston's in a similar situation where Chara's got 1 year left in his contract. He's just going to renew every year until he's done playing. They have Marchand, Pasternak, and Bergeron all making under 7, and Krejci's deal I think has another year left. So they don't have a lot of long-term money tied up. But the question is whether McAvoy wants to take a little less on a long-term deal or bets on himself and takes a bridge. Anthony, you first. Bridge, long-term, or unsigned?
I think the Bruins are going to sign him long-term. I do. I think they see him as a franchise cornerstone and the natural successor to Zdeno Chara.
Russ?
Yeah, it's going to be long term. I don't think he'll accept a bridge, and I don't think they would have gotten to the Stanley Cup without him. So I think Boston's over a barrel here too. They have to sign him. Like they have to give him, and he's going to make more than all the other guys you mentioned because of the position and what it entails now and the cost value of it. So if you have to pay him 8 by 7, just get it over with.
I think it'll be 8 by 8. I think it'll be 8 by 8.
It could be 8 by 8, but maybe they go 7. Maybe they won't give him 8. Who knows?
And he's 21 years old, so that would take him to 28 years old. He'd still be able to get another long-term deal.
And that's why maybe he would want 7 over 8. Like, because once you get to 29, people start questioning you. 28, they don't really question you. I don't know why. That's just the way.
I know I was over the hill at 29.
That's because you have bad knees.
There you go. Still do. All right. Let's take a couple questions from the chat and then one.
All right. Let's go back here and see.
By the way, I'm taking a lot of heat for taking a picture of Rick James's.
Yeah, I told her that was weird.
No, it's not weird. I'm sorry. It was a nice leisurely walk in the morning, and I just happened to walk by Rick James's plot at Forest Lawn Cemetery in downtown Buffalo, and I took a picture of it. It's not like I invaded his space.
You got in and you said, you saw I take a picture, or else I'm going to get sticky with the icky.
Rick James, bitch.
Zook in the chat room, I'm not even going to try and pronounce his last name, asks, will Trent Frederick play? He definitely will play in the NHL. The issue with Frederick and Studnicka is these guys are real close. Yeah. And Boston is not a team that likes to rush their guys. Right. Studnicka almost made the team last year, but they were right in not letting him make it. And so now this year, they're going to go through the same thing again because of what Mike said. Hey, some of their weaknesses would be filled by these guys, but it's going to go down to the wire. Both of them still may not play in the NHL this year, but they're very close. And again, it's a good situation for Boston to be in, honestly.
It's more likely that the guys that they added in free agency, like Richie, who had some experience with Dallas, or Lindholm was versatile, that they fill the fourth line role that Achari vacated by signing with Florida. And then they bring up, Senishin or some of these youngsters. They like to overcook their prospects in Providence, and that's probably what's going to happen.
Nix is asking, and we'll let Mike answer this, is Marner looking for 12 plus per year?
I think if it's a long-term deal, that probably he's looking.
Which Marner are we talking about? I think that's important.
Yeah, well, Paul Marner should get an AHL contract. No, I think if the Leafs and Marner are talking 7 or 8 years, that's probably the range that he would be looking for, and that's why I don't think that it's going to be a 6 or 7 or 8 year deal. I think it's leaning more toward at max a 6-year deal, and at the absolute worst a 2-year deal where he gets overpaid on a 2-year bridge. I mean, I know that Elliot Friedman reported a couple weeks ago that a 2-year bridge at say $8 million would set a new precedent, which Kyle Dubas doesn't mind doing because he did it with Matthews on a 5-year deal, paying him, basically what most players are getting on an 8-year deal. So I think that's going to be the compromise, is going to be a 2-year bridge at around $8 million.
I don't think he'll accept 2 years. I think he'll want 3 because of the potential lockout. He is not going to let a bridge be up when there's a potential lockout. That's the problem.
Yeah, and if that's the case, then they probably do what San Jose did with Timo Meier. That 3rd year will probably be heavy bonus and heavy, it'll be backloaded.
Yeah.
So the last deal will be, the last year will be 10 or 11 million or something like that, and then he goes into the final year before turning UFA. And if he goes to arbitration, the arbitration or the qualifying offer ends up at a high amount. So that's possible.
Yeah, I'm just saying you have to look at it like an agent.
Sure.
They're not going to let a player of that caliber sort of walk into that kind of deal.
Right.
I don't think. All right.
Good point.
Let's see. Lord said there's no American sports on the telly now. Watch Wimbledon. Roger Federer is playing. What's wrong with you?
But he's not American.
Who cares? Why does it have to be American sports?
Yeah, don't worry. Baseball's back tomorrow. The Yankees will be back.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're all looking forward to that one.
Well, the Mets season's over with now that Pete Alonso won the home run derby.
All right. Marcus wants to know, these major D RFAs are playing chicken together. Who caves first? I can tell you it won't be Provorov. That's a guarantee.
I don't think
Mark Gandler.
I think cave is the wrong word, but I think if you're talking about the big 3, Werenski, Provorov, McAvoy, the one who will sign first out of that list will be McAvoy.
I think so too. I think because they'll be the most pressure from that franchise and their fan base to sort of get it done.
Right.
The fan base right now is completely resigned to the fact that they're going to have to wait for Provorov and there could be a holdout. I haven't talked to one fan yet that is chomping at the bit saying, why isn't he signed yet? Everybody knows. Everybody knows the way that situation is.
See, you could have a Nylander situation with Philadelphia because they still have cap space. And if this goes into the season like Nylander does, Philadelphia will still have the flexibility to have that front-loaded first year on a long-term deal. It won't kill them against the cap.
And that's the reason why they are currently holding 8 defensemen on roster right now, with basically the final 3 being. That's the reason why they haven't moved off of. For everybody who anticipated a Shane Gostisbehere deal, or Robert Haig deal, that didn't come to fruition because, again, there's a possibility that they want to make sure to have their defensive depth in place going into the season. If these contracts do, in fact, are that protracted, that it turns into a holdout, because then
you can't trade someone and then have a potential holdout that'll
exactly. Then you're already in a thin spot already. You've already bought out David Schlemko already,
right?
And several others are out.
Donald,
yeah.
All right, one more question, and then I want Ant to bring up something that he mentioned to us.
Right.
The last question is, and I had it, and now I lost it. I can't find it. I will say this. I watched a few minutes of Jack Hughes today, 3-on-3, short ice in the Devils camp, and I got to tell you something. If you don't think Jack Hughes should be in the NHL, you are crazy. And for what we saw out of Morgan Frost that looked really good, he shows that and even a little more right now. It's just he does shots between his legs, he does passes, and he doesn't do it to show off. This is just part of his arsenal to open up things for his teammates. And so there was nobody on the ice that could even stay with him, and he could pretty much score a goal at will. Anthony had a point here that he wanted to bring up about Sean Couturier, because could people actually be wondering if he's a first-line center or not?
It's a conversation that we had based off of Charlie O'Connor from The Athletic had brought up Don, I can never quite say his name, but Lucian's article on the best current contracts in the National Hockey League. Mm-hmm. Charlie was hinting, not so cryptically, said there's a flyer on this list, and I said in response, let me guess.
Yeah.
The topic goes to Sean Couturier, and Charlie replied and said, I still, 2 years ago, I was debating idiots online about whether or not he's a number one center or not. And invariably that brought people out to say, to argue potentially against it. When you think of top line centers, do you think of Sean Couturier? Do you ask whether or not you want him on your team as a first-line center. And it's like, do you look at the numbers? Do you look at what he does overall for the team? Not just all circumstances. He's now for 2 consecutive seasons is in mid-70s in terms of points, which in my mind in the current NHL is basically a first-line center in this circumstance. Yeah, is that if you're trying to compare him with like Hall of Fame level players? No, but 30-some teams in the National Hockey League. Sorry, 70 points, 2 straight consecutive seasons.
I think
he's a top-line center.
I think in a way he's a poor man's Jonathan Toews because he's not a big body like a number 1 center. Neither is Toews.
He's getting there, Mike.
He's a bigger. I mean, the one thing they always joke about. I remember, about Couturier's, chest area not necessarily being the most developed, but his upper body is strong. He can handle himself. And he's one of the HL's top possession players, consistently. And
his offensive game has progressed in the last couple of years, but he was always a good defensive player. And I think Toews is a two-way forward who can, I just think that, Couturier hasn't had the benefit of being surrounded with the type of players that.
Exactly. He doesn't have the game breaker. The closest thing he's had of late now, certainly if he can continue to be consistent in terms of being that mercurial offensive talent, he has obviously, Giroux on his left now. Theoretically, right now, Travis Konechny, as he's developing, could I don't know. He's not Patrick Kane, but he can round himself into an offensive threat with another year of development since he came into the NHL so early to begin with.
Right. I feel very confident right now. If we were ranking the top centers in the league, he'd be around 15.
Yeah,
I think that's fair. I'd say I probably might rank him a teensy bit higher, maybe in the upper teens in this circumstance, probably around 12 or so, but. His overall game, he's a top line center. He's not Crosby. Doesn't have how many players are that? The guy I constantly compare him with is the guy who was drafted in front of him, which is Mark Scheifele. And I think they're both on a similar track, different type of players because Scheifele I think had more of an offensive profile coming into the league.
Right.
But the numbers are the numbers.
And Scheifele is a bigger body guy who people can see as a number 1 center. And the only reason there's a doubt in people's minds about Couturier is because Couturier's offensive game has only matured in the last couple of years. And he's I know he's getting bigger now, but I think they looked upon him as he's the guy that checks Malkin, but he's not a complete 2-way center. Now he is.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And the last thing is we should say happy trails to Matt Cullen. He is retiring.
But I won't. I'm not going to say it until October 3rd when the puck is dropped on the season and I don't see Matt Cullen out there. Then at that point I will say, Matt Cullen, happy trails.
So that's fair. That's fair. On that day you should be saying happy birthday to me too. But the other thing is with Matt Cullen, he's had a great career, but like some players, for whatever reason, when he went to New York, he had like 41 points, 16 goals. I just reviewed it. It wasn't a great year for him, but they used him like a lot of times in New York with like Eric Stahl, not the way you should use Matt Cullen. They actually used him at the point on the power play for a while because he has a great shot, and it just, it didn't work out. And so, but he's really had a great career. The other thing to point out, I like Matt Cullen. The other thing is though, when all professional athletes go to retire, they have to write it on the Players Tribune. It seems like a rule now.
So Anthony's fearful that Matt Cullen in 10 years is going to do a Carl Brewer and come back at he'd be like 51, but Carl
Minoso.
I wouldn't be afraid of it. I just wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, ask Lee fans when Carl Brewer came back. I think it was in 79 or 80. When Punch Imlach was in Toronto, he got his helmet knocked off. And he was completely bald, and he got a cut on his head. And all people ever remember about Carl Brewer was this old guy who was bald who got cut on his head. That's all people remember. Not the guy who won Stanley Cups in the 60s, just this old guy who got his got a cut.
Attention spans were as bad back then as they are now.
Yes. All right. Good show, guys. We'll be back tomorrow for another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Anthony Mangione, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.